Hello. Ho, 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 ho. I'm black and white. I am black and white. It was my birthday yesterday, 86. Does one become black and white when you get over 85? Oh no, I'm black and white. Old films, then black and white. I'm 86, black and white. That's it. Explained. When you get over 85, you become black and white. It's kind of weird though, because I still feel childish. Can one feel childish in the first stage of development, which is prenatal? I don't think that's possible. I don't know. Anyway, after that, you've got childhood. So to be childhood, that's childish. Childish and childhood, that's good. After childhood, you've got adolescence, social construct. Remember, where is it? Social construct. Don't forget. Social construct. Social. And then there is adulthood. Simple. Well, it was simple until this guy called Piaget, 1952, came up and he thought all those stages were, I'm still black and white. Anyway, Piaget, 1952, came up and he thought, let's make things more interesting. So he came up with 4 stages. First stage is sensory motor. Sensory motor is a stage where the child acquires senses and is learning to move. Sensory motor. That makes sense. Second stage is when the child is learning a bit about life. I'll come back to that. Second stage is a pre-operational stage. Third stage is concrete operational stage. And the last stage is formal operational stage. Now, the key difference really is between 2 stages. Piaget in 1952, remember Piaget? Yeah, the guy who ruined the normal evolution. Yeah, him. He came up with those 4 stages. And the key thing on Piaget's work is the difference between the second stage and the third stage, is the difference between pre-operational and concrete operational. The difference is conservation of numbers. He's done an experiment with some children and he realized that if you give a child 4 tokens, for example, and you ask him to count the tokens, he'll come up or she'll come up with 4. And then if you move the tokens around, if the child thinks the number is different, then they do not realize that the tokens have conserved the number. So that means this child is on pre-operational stage. So basically, that's it. Sensory motor, senses, then and motor, then pre-operational stage, which means they don't understand the conservation of numbers, then concrete operational stage when they do understand conservation of numbers, and then finally the formal operational stage. Remember Isaac when he did his work on crime and he asked, and somebody else checked it. Well, Piaget did his own checking. He came up with a theory and he came up with his own things. And he did it with a tiny class of children. He included even his own children when he did the experiment. So when he came up with those 4 stages, was this representative? Let me ask you. Was this representative? Probably not. Was the experiment well thought out? Well, hold on. If you ask a child how many cards, how many tokens they are, and then you move the tokens again, and then you ask the child the same question, the child might think, well, hold on, the first question was wrong, so I'm going to change the number. So the experiment probably wasn't that well thought out anyway. Probably. So we could say it lacks construct validity because of the asking the same question twice. Difficult to universalize all his findings based on just a small class of kids and his own children. So, Piaget, what were you drinking? Got a book out of it. Fair enough. Anyway, fortunately, Gardner came up with a much better idea of explaining how people grow up to be like me, black and white. He came up with multiple intelligence, which means people learn in different styles: kinesthetic, hands-on, musical. Lots and lots and lots of work has been done about it. But Daniel Willingham looked at it, totally disproved it. Multiple intelligence, no evidence for it. So you got Piaget, who comes up with a theory based on 3 Muppets and his kids. Then you got Willingham, who comes in and looks at Gardner's idea and realizes, well, that's a lot of rubbish. Fortunately, somebody else came in, Dweck. Dweck came up with the idea that positive growth mindset will help the individual grow faster. Like Eysenck, Dweck didn't do her own experiment, but Blackwell et al. In 2007, they checked Dweck's hypothesis that people with a growth mindset would achieve better than people with a fixed mindset. So the sample was 373 students from 4 successive years. That was taken in New York. They were ethnically and economically diverse, and the method was a questionnaire. They asked before training them, and then they asked again after. What did they find? They found that mindset was a significant predictor, and there was actually a correlation, which is really rare in psych. If you have a growth mindset, you will get better results. You will achieve better, comparatively speaking. Some people had a pop at it. They said the sample wasn't representative because it was in New York, so they managed to do the culture and everything else. But age bias, they only chose students from a certain age, and they only focused on math. So some people say it lacks, you guessed it, construct validity, because intelligence and everything is not just math. Having said that, something that I take with me all the time is positive growth mindset has an impact. Maybe something for you guys to accept.
Hasn't started yet.
Oh, thank God.
Quite funny, yeah.
He is.
Anyone knows anything about psychological problems?
Mental health is a complex subject.
Oh, yes, it is. So what is mental health?
According to Maria Hoda, self-actualization, resistance to stress, autonomy, and accurate perception of reality affect mental health, as well as positive attitudes.
You're meant to have a positive outlook on life, good relationship, productive life, you're meant to be good at problem solving and having high self-esteem.
So what is a bad mental health?
Bad mental health is loss of appetite, loss of sleep, loss of control over stress, alcoholism, and isolation.
When can you say you actually have a mental disorder?
When it is diagnosed by a doctor or hospital, you can't actually self-diagnose yourself.
And what should you do if you have psychological problems?
You should probably talk to someone, but the biggest problem is stigma.
How do you get rid of self-stigma?
Blair Fettel said that the best way to deal with mental illness is using community care. This way you're not isolated, you have friends, and so you're on your way to meeting a good definition of mental health.
Phil, do you think schizophrenia is a mental illness, or are you two minds about it?
To be diagnosed as schizophrenic, you must have 2 of these behaviours: catatonic and disorganised speech, negative symptoms, persistent hallucination.
Or just one of these behaviours. Delusion of control, hallucinatory voices, persistent delusions, or thought disturbances.
So Ollie, how do you become schizophrenic?
The Nicholas theory is through dopamine.
Too much dopamine and you are more likely to be schizophrenic.
Weinberger, SR. They worked on the effect of amphetamine on the regional blood flow.
So how did they do that?
They gave amphetamines to some and placebo to others, and looked at the results on the cerebral cortex.
Are we talking about amphetamine or dopamine?
We're talking about amphetamine. Give amphetamine to someone and they get more dopamine, then you can see the results.
Okay. Any other ways you can get schizophrenia?
Not from nature's perspective, but plenty of work on this through nature's perspective. Cooper came up with the social causation theory.
You're from a low social class, so you're more likely to get it.
Alfred Wegener came up with the opposite idea.
You have schizophrenia, so you end up in a lower social class.
What about depression?
Depression can be explained by the social rank theory that Stevens and Price came up with. If you're too competitive, you get depressed.
Tom Duck, get on with that.
No, Stevens and Price came up with it, but Tandock studied it using Facebook.
Okay, what did you find?
It's not the amount of friends that matter, but it's the amount of time you spend on Facebook that creates depression.
Well, Facebook is out of date for young people now. Tandock used surveys, so it's not sure whether people told the truth.
And was this a good experiment?
Well, maybe it is fair to say that it lacked constructibility. It was difficult to universalise because the sample was not representative.